There are three song lyrics that keep coming into my head. Can't get rid of them last few days. One is from a soul record by Lou Rawls from the 1970s, where he asks, "What's the matter with the world? Has the world gone mad?" Nothing's wrong with the world. It's just the people that's in it. And I'm sure many of us can relate to that as we go about our daily business, which doesn't consist of a whole lot because there's only 2 or 3 things you can do now. One of them involves going out to the store for essential supplies, and hasn't that become a complete burden? Haven't these stores become akin to madhouses, straight lunatic asylums, with behaviours that would have been unthinkable just a month ago? People queuing out in the car park, standing there with their trolleys, patiently waiting to get in the store. Once you do get in, there's stupid bits of tape everywhere, arrows, one-way systems, people walking around with masks on their faces or scarves and hoods pulled over their mouths as if that's going to protect them and save their life from you when you walk in that pasta aisle and get a little too close to them. You might cough or you might sneeze and they could die instantly on the spot if it weren't for these masks saving their lives. Another song lyric that is in my head comes from Morrissey of the Smiths from their song Panic, where he says, "Will life ever be sane again?" Well, I'd like to know that as well, mate, you and me both. And there's another Morrissey lyric from one of his solo tracks, "Every Day is Like Sunday," where he says, "Every day is silent and grey." And I'm sure it's like that for many of us as well. Under house arrest now, every day seems like any other. You lose track of what day of the week it is. It doesn't really matter because you do the same stuff every day anyway, which again consists of like 2 or 3 different things. So isn't it straight madness how all of our lives have changed so rapidly, and a lot of people seem to be coping with it, you know, from the impression I get seeing people out on the streets, seeing people in shops, discussions that I see going back and forth on Facebook and other platforms. A lot of people seem to just meekly accept that we all have to stay in our houses. They're buying the official story that if we go out and exercise our freedoms of movement, we are going to spread this virus and people are going to die, as per the government narrative. Very few people are asking questions like whether the official account of what's really going on with this COVID-19 thing stands up to scrutiny. I made the video a few days ago, which many people may have seen, where I lay out all my thoughts and my reflections on the dynamics that are playing out right now. I've got lots of questions about things that don't add up, and I'm making this video at the tail end of 3 weeks of lockdown here in the UK. So it's Easter Sunday. 3 weeks ago tomorrow, Boris Johnson issued the British government's instructions to people to stay at home and only go out for essential means, exercise, medical supplies, shopping, and essential work. I see there were chemtrail planes up in the sky this morning, so in a time of national crisis, obviously dumping poison in the skies has been deemed essential work. But anyway, the situation regarding the UK lockdown was due to have been reviewed after the 3-week period, which expires tomorrow. Since then, we've had the debacle of Boris Johnson supposedly contracting the virus and being hospitalised because of it. And over the past few days, the headlines have scared everyone into thinking that he's very seriously affected and he might not pull through. And then the narrative shifts to, oh, he's getting better, he's sitting up in bed and he's reading Tintin books. And now we get the news that today, Easter Sunday, Boris is being discharged from hospital and he's back to resume his duties. Now, I can't help wondering if there's some symbolism going on here, and if the narrative is being framed in a certain way for British people when it comes to Boris Johnson. There seem to have been aspects of Boris being presented as a sort of modern day Winston Churchill, a saviour for the nation, and a few people have felt that when the worst of this lockdown situation is over, whenever that may be, Boris is going to be hailed and held up as a modern day British hero, a true patriot that led this nation through its desperate hour of darkness and brought us all through to better days. So what day does he get released from hospital? Easter Sunday. It's almost as if he's being framed in a saviour, messiah-like way. So, according to the Easter story, Jesus rose from the dead on Easter Sunday. That's what the day commemorates. And we have Boris Johnson emerging from potentially the brink of death with a new lease of life and being presented as a saviour figure for the British people. So I do wonder if a lot of the way this thing is playing out in the UK specifically is being done according to dates. People will have noticed that most of the lockdowns across Europe and other parts of the world occurred around the time of the spring equinox. This was all around 21st, 22nd of March. That's when the astrological sign of Aries transitions into Pisces, and it's the original start of the solar year. It starts in March, and January and February were months that were added to the original calendar, which consisted of 10 months. So the true start of the year, and it could be said to be the true start of 2020, was actually the spring equinox, 21st, 22nd of March. And that was the week where most countries went into these draconian lockdown situations, and we're told the death toll from the coronavirus started to go through the roof. That was when the worst of it really started to hit. So that's all in line with the spring equinox. It's astrotheology, it's occult religious belief systems going back to the ancient world. And we know that many of the controllers of organised society that are pulling all these strings and making world events happen are occultists who observe many of these festivals and ceremonies and occasions. So then, as I mentioned in my previous video, in the occult world, the dark occult belief systems, there is a 40-day period that is known as the occult season of sacrifice. It's tied in with the cycles of the sun, it goes into solar worship, and it kicks off round about the 19th of March, just before the spring equinox, and it runs all the way through to the 1st of May. Which is Beltane, it's May Day, it's a very important date in the pagan calendar and the occult calendar generally. So it makes me wonder whether these lockdown situations are due to be in place for the rest of April, and when May comes around, we may see them partially lifted in line with these occult belief systems. So we've had this 3-week period which expires on the 13th of April tomorrow. 3 weeks on from that takes us to the 4th of May, which is a bank holiday Monday in the UK, public holiday, observing May Day. It's known as the May Day holiday. So is it possible that all of this is being played out according to these important dates? And could it be that at the beginning of May we're going to start to see some of these restrictions lifted? Nobody really knows what the situation is with the lockdown. Apparently it's due to be reviewed on Thursday, this coming Thursday the 16th of April. It seems a foregone conclusion that the closure of schools and pubs and restaurants and bars and all this is going to remain in place for a period yet. I've had it on good authority from people that work within the school system that there are plans in place for British schools to start going back after the May half term. That is what somebody that works within the school system has heard from her higher ups. So that would mean another 6 or 7 weeks of kids being off school, families being put into house arrest together before the end of May. And if the schools do indeed go back at that point, then you've got a few weeks before the summer holiday situation. I hear that across Europe the lockdowns are being gradually lifted in various territories. So this coming Wednesday the 15th of April, schools in Denmark, I'm told, are going to start to go back. Hopefully that indicates a return to relative normality in that nation, in that hopefully restaurants and bars and small shops will follow directly afterwards. I've heard that Austria and the Czech Republic next week is due to lift the restrictions on some of the smaller shops and smaller businesses and allow them to reopen. Isn't it just ridiculous that we're getting permission and being allowed to trade and to go the places that we want? These despotic fascist dictatorship governments, many of which still masquerade as democracies and would have us believe that we choose our leaders and that they're answerable to us and all this. They are dictating our freedoms of movement, when the truth is we're all sovereign, free beings in creation, endowed with the God-given natural right to freedom of movement and freedom of assembly. We can meet up with whoever we want, we can go wherever we want, wherever our free will takes us, so long as we're causing no harm and no loss. The way they framed it is that if we do go about our business and go out there and walk around where we want, we'll be putting other people at risk, and we could kill them because anybody could be carrying the virus with no symptoms showing and anybody can spread it. The science just doesn't add up, as I discussed in my other video, and as many other researchers have been showing, many medical professionals as well, talking about how a virus cannot actually be spread from person to person the way we're told it can. And actually, when a human body is displaying symptoms of a virus, it's a natural function of the immune system which is excreting what are known as exosomes, and it's a response to poisoning, basically, or toxicity having been taken in by the body from any number of different sources. Radiation maybe, electromagnetic pollution maybe, can't think where all that might be coming from in these times. But the body's natural response to this is to excrete this biological matter from the cells to just try and get rid of it, because it's recognizing that it's poisoning the body. So it's a very personal thing that takes place within an individual's own body, and it can't actually be transmitted from person to person in the way we're told this coronavirus can. So we're being given false science, we're being taken for mugs, and this is all being used as an excuse, as a justification for putting us into collective punishment, house arrest, martial law, which is what it is in most countries around the world. And at the same time, our freedoms of movement are being taken away from us. Surveillance and monitoring is being stepped up. We hear that just around the corner are things being proposed like mandatory vaccines, which will be laced with tiny RFID nano chips, which will be used to trace our every movement. This is in line with smart cities. It's in line with facial recognition technology, which is tied to 5G. This is tied to the Internet of Things, the Smart City Agenda, Agenda 2030 coming out of the United Nations. All of these subjects are linked, and they've all been on the wish list of the controllers of organised society for a very long time. And in one fell swoop, they've taken us all by surprise. They've changed the structure and the texture of the entire world in a very short period of time, and most of us just didn't see it coming and have no idea what has happened to us. But all of these things that have been warned about for so long by myself and many others all seem to be coming to pass in this time. The reason I'm making this video is because a lot of people are requesting that I give my thoughts and my reflections and my musings on our current situation. So I thought at the tail end of this 3-week lockdown period, it would be a good idea for me to just gather some of my thoughts. I mean, the truth is, I'm as confused and as confounded as to what's really going on as anyone else. I'm no guru, I'm no sage, I'm no seer, I'm not someone that has all the answers. I'm someone that just observes the same as anyone else and collates information from many different sources and tries to make sense of it. So what I've been seeing over the last week is a lot of conflicting reports as to what's happening. There has of course been a lot of footage from citizen researchers, citizen journalists doing the job that real paid corporate journalists should be doing, but don't, because they're just paid prostitutes in the pockets of the corporations and the states that employ them, towing the official line, reinforcing the narrative that suits the owners of organised society. But members of the public have been doing the job that these people should, and they've been going into many of the hospitals that we're told are the hardest hit by this coronavirus pandemic. We hear that the staff can't cope, the hospitals are at breaking point, it's absolute chaos in there, it's bedlam, they haven't got enough beds, they haven't got enough ventilators, and people are dying left, right and centre. They just can't keep on top of it. So many of these citizen journalists have gone into the very hospitals that we're told are creaking under the strain of all this, both in Britain and America and many other countries, and they've shown through footage that they've taken that these hospitals are actually, in many cases, empty. There's, a skeleton staff wandering around with not a whole lot to do because there's nobody in there. There's nobody in the A&E departments. There's empty beds everywhere. So you think to yourself, well, the whole thing is obviously a hoax. It's a con. There can't be a virus. We're just being had on by all this. However, what's come across my radar in the last few days at the very same time, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of other people, are reports that people are genuinely dying from something. It appears to be from a pandemic virus, from the symptoms that we're told come out from this thing. So I've spoken to a lot of people that I know personally. I've got no reason to think that they would be lying or they'd be hyping the whole thing up out of all proportion, and they've told me that they personally know people that have gone into hospital and they've died seemingly of this thing, and they know other people who in turn know others personally, and the death toll, when you look at it this way, really is quite high. So you've got to wonder what's going on here. Are we being fed misinformation deliberately to sow confusion and to muddy the waters so that those of us looking for the truth get all tied up and confounded and just don't know what's happening? So are we being told that these specific hospitals are overrun and can't cope, in the hope that some people go to these places and confirm that there's nobody in there, that they're empty, so we then go out and report that the whole thing is a hoax? Meanwhile, people really are dying, and so others look at the individuals that are saying the whole thing's a put-up job, it's a hoax, and they accuse them of being heartless and insensitive and spreading mistruths. So they get demonized and they get branded as sensationalizing the whole thing and just being really insensitive to people's feelings at this very desperate time for humanity. You've got to wonder whether there's an element of that going on, just tying people up in knots so they just don't know what to think. I certainly think that's probably the case. Other things that have happened in the last week. There was the David Icke interview that he did with the London Real TV station, interviewed by Brian Wilde. Now this was a real game changer. It was live streamed last Monday, watched by hundreds of thousands of people over the world, and since then the video has evidently been viewed millions of times. It was very promptly pulled from YouTube, apparently at the behest of Google having been campaigned by the BBC to have it taken down, and Ofcom got involved as well. Now, the last time I checked, Ofcom has no jurisdiction over internet content. It regulates broadcasts on radio and TV networks, but not stuff that goes out via the internet. So they should have no place in saying what can stay and what can't on the internet. Also, I wonder what the BBC has to do with this whole affair. Why is the BBC sticking its nose in? What kind of sway and influence does it have over Google in terms of influencing it to get this David Icke interview removed from Google, as it evidently did from YouTube? Also, Vimeo dumped the very same video, and the whole iconic TV network, which David Icke and others have built up, was reportedly pulled from Vimeo as a platform in the last few days as well, in the wake of the controversy that this video has generated. So the official line is that everything David Icke was talking about is complete nonsense, it's conspiracy theory, it has no basis in fact, and people shouldn't be watching it. Well, if everything that he did say was complete nonsense and crap, then what harm can it really do? If the official story that we're given by governments, by the mainstream media, by medical professionals that they wheel out to reinforce the official narrative, if all of that stands up to scrutiny, and if anyone looks into it to check what they're being told, and it all checks out, it can all be verified, it's all factual, what we're being given, why would they need to worry about what they're framing to be some madman just spouting some conspiracy theory? Why would that bother them? I like to think that the controversy that's been generated by this David Icke video being taken down, and all the furore and the row that has followed in its wake, may backfire on the architects and controllers of this narrative, in that it will cause many people whose lives have been directly affected by this situation, they're under house arrest, their kids aren't going to school, their businesses are failing, they can't go out and earn a living anymore, They don't know how they're going to pay their bills, and they're being told by their government where and when they can go out, which is not a lot. I like to think that a lot of these people are going to be questioning things that they've never questioned before, and many of them, hearing about this controversial video that had to be removed from the internet because of the things that it was saying, are now going to be more compelled to seek it out and listen to exactly what it was saying than would otherwise be the case. And so it's going to switch on a large number of people to information that they would never ordinarily have thought to look at. I like to think that dynamic is going to play out. I put out my own video the other day as well, and I've had quite a bit of feedback from it. Obviously there have been some naysayers, obviously there have been some skeptics and some haters, and lots of people saying I don't know what I'm talking about, and just sticking to the official narrative. But I've received lots of feedback to the contrary, from people that I know personally, saying that they've shared it with normies, you know, regular members of society, family and friends who never normally think to question official narratives and apply critical thinking to situations. And they've come back to them and said, wow, this has really made me think. A lot of it makes sense. It answers a lot of questions that I had about the situation that we're finding ourselves in. And it's caused me to see everything in a completely new light. And now I'm going to be asking all kinds of questions about what we're being told in this situation. That can only be a good thing. What else did I want to discuss? Well, there's been a big pushback towards Bill Gates this week as well, I've noticed, and rightly so, because Bill Gates's fingerprints are all over the apparent solutions that we're told are going to be brought into this coronavirus situation. So you can bet there's going to be a big push towards mandatory vaccines, because that's something that has been on the elite wish list for a very long time. Bill Gates has his finger in that pie. He is the guy that is being put out there as the figurehead for a vaccine that is supposedly going to cure this virus. But as I said earlier, you can be sure this is going to be tied in with the ID 2020 project, which is all about getting digital identification through artificial intelligence for ultimately everyone on Earth, so that they can be remotely tracked and their movements and all the personal data about them pulled up on a computer in a moment once these people have been identified by way of a chip, a microchip, or some kind of identifying device that they're going to be carrying about them. So it's pretty clear from research that's been done that the plans for a vaccine, which we're being told are going to be necessary if we're all going to return to regular normal walks of life and everything's going to get back to how it was, the only way it can, and the only way things like mass gatherings are going to be allowed because of the threat of transmitting the virus, you know, from person to person, is if everyone has taken one of these vaccines. But the vaccine is going to contain the chip, which is going to ultimately control and limit your movements and everything you do. It's also going to be tied in with electronic currency as a replacement for cash, because that's another narrative that's been running through this whole thing, how dangerous cash apparently is because the virus can be carried on the cash, which again is complete rubbish, is unscientific. Viruses don't work that way, but that's what we're being told. So Bill Gates is all about the vaccines. He was behind Event 201, which was this simulated exercise that took place in October, just a few weeks before the COVID-19 situation all kicked off. He's involved in that alongside the World Economic Forum. He's also involved in the World Health Organization. He's got ties to the United Nations, and all these organizations are controlling what's being told to us about COVID-19 and what's being proposed as the only solutions that can be applied if life is to return to normal for all of us. Bill Gates is all over this. So many truth seekers and researchers have gone to great pains to try and communicate to the general public, to regular mainstream members of society, just what a demon and what an evil psychopath Bill Gates truly is. Far from being this nerdy computer guy who invented Microsoft, there is much more to know about him. As I mentioned in my last video, he's a prominent eugenicist. He's all about population reduction. He has gone on the record in saying that he would like to significantly reduce the world's population. this ties into his work with vaccines. His father was a prominent member of Planned Parenthood, which was a eugenics organisation coming out of the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's all about reducing the numbers of useless eaters, as they see us as, in society. And also, genealogists have done research into who Bill Gates really is. He's a lifetime actor. He's one of these people that gets put into a prominent, influential position in society to the point that everyone knows his name. But how did he get there? Well, whenever this happens, it's almost always down to family, bloodline links, ancestry, genealogy. And it's been discovered that if you go far back enough in the family line, Bill Gates connects into the Rockefeller bloodline, the House of Rockefeller. And the Rockefellers, along with the Rothschilds and other families, are the key orchestrators and have been for generations of all these plans to enslave and control the rest of humanity. So it shouldn't really be any surprise that Bill Gates is dominating this whole narrative and his name is everywhere. He's being wheeled out on interviews and news reports talking about medical issues connected with vaccines and viruses and stuff when he has no background in medicine at all. He has no qualifications in health or medicine, and yet he's being put out there as an expert on these things and given a free platform to spout his views. That's got to tell you something. Now, what else? Really, that's the bulk of what I wanted to communicate to you at this time. It's at the end of the 3-week lockdown period in the UK. It's clearly going to continue on in this nation. We're going to have to put up with this situation unless we choose to take it into our own hands and non-comply on a mass basis. But coordination of anything like that has been made difficult due to the fact that we can't freely go out and meet up with other people. We've had our freedom of assembly taken from us. Again, not that these things can ever legitimately be taken, but under the guise of being taken from us, we can't freely meet up with others. So the only communication that we have with our peers is via electronic methods, via phone or Skype or Zoom or something like that. And of course, all these communications can be, and most certainly are, monitored by the security services, so they keep tabs on what we're all saying. So it's an ingenious plan, really, the way they've done it. So we've got to hunker down and put up with this lockdown situation for who knows how much longer. It is encouraging that certain European nations appear to be exiting from this. Austria and Czech Republic, as I say, are supposed to be slowly coming out of their restrictions shortly. I hear that Spain, one of the worst hit European nations, apparently from the 26th of April, is going to start easing back on some of the social restrictions. So that's got to be encouraging as well. I'm hoping that I'm correct in predicting. I don't like making predictions because it's a dangerous thing. But I do have a feeling that when early May comes around, we might see some of these draconian measures in the UK start to be rolled back, and life might start to improve very slowly for many of us, in line with the May Day occasion, in line with the way Boris Johnson is being framed as a modern-day Winston Churchill, saviour for the nation. It wouldn't surprise me that on May Bank Holiday, the public holiday in England at the start of that month, Boris makes some kind of announcement to the nation and he gets hailed as a hero, having led us through these difficult times. And of course he'll storm to victory in the next election then, being perceived in that way. That may be the way they're framing Donald Trump in the United States as well, as a result of all of this. But I do like to think that things might improve and change for us in the UK in May, but it seems that for the rest of April we've got a pretty miserable month, and we've just got to make the best of it and do what we need to do. As I said, every day just feels like any other. I do have a long list of tasks, things that I've wanted to do for some time that I could be using this time to do, but I don't know if other people feel the same way. I find it very difficult to focus. I've got other things on my mind that keep just popping into my consciousness, and I find it very difficult to focus on other tasks that are mentally demanding. So I need to try and get over that. The only other thing I wanted to mention on this video is the situation involving Ian R. Crane, who will be familiar to many people watching this, Ian has been a researcher and a public speaker and an activist for many, many years. He's been the organiser of the Alternative View conferences, and he's been a great voice and a very prominent spokesperson for the truth movement, if you want to call it that, the alternative news movement in the UK. He's campaigned actively against fracking, against smart grids, against 5G. I found out only a few days ago that Ian has been suffering from a very aggressive form of late-stage cancer, and yesterday, which was Easter Saturday, 11th of April, Ian went into surgery in hospital. There's an interview that he did, just a brief phone call just before he went into surgery, which is available on YouTube, where he was saying that he might not make it out because this is kind of touch and go surgery. This operation is very delicate, it could go either way, and the worst could happen. Thankfully, I've heard today that Ian underwent surgery and he's pulled through, and as things currently stand on Sunday, he's doing okay. So I sincerely hope that means he's going to fully make a recovery and come back to us, in full form in due course. I just thought people might like to be aware of the situation with Ian, because he's done great service to all the stuff that we talk about, and has been a very prominent voice in getting truthful information out into the world. He's made a lot of personal sacrifices, and I respect the guy a lot for all that he's done. So it's great news that he has pulled through this surgery, and let's all put our collective will towards him making a full recovery in due course. Well, aren't these incredible times? 2020. What a year, eh? So I'll come back to you again when I've got something more to say, but for now, this is how the world is looking to me on Easter Sunday of 2020. And as I said, there's some symbolism there, I'm sure. Stay safe, don't believe the hype, question everything, don't comply with your own tyranny, and I'll catch you all again soon.